Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a different video. In case you didn't notice, this is not York Haven. This is my couch with a blanket here and another blanket here and this picture and this big cardboard box we keep back here. I'm going to do a somewhat different video, which is going to be a reaction video like other YouTubers do. And today I'm going to be reacting to this article, Across the USA by Train for just $213. So this came out a couple years ago, and people would send this to me all the time. Like I saw it on my own first, and I read it, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then people would send it to me. They'd tag me on Facebook in it or put it on my Facebook wall or email it to me or text it to me or do something at least once a week about it for about a year and a half or so. And then people didn't do it for a month. And so I felt like it was safe to make a post saying, guys, I know what this article is. I've seen it before. And lately, people have stopped doing it. And I just remembered that people did this a while ago and thought that I would make a reaction video to this article. And I would explain what the things are in it are about. Oftentimes, people didn't even seem like they read the article. They just saw train in the article somewhere and sent it over to me, which I'm glad that people know me as the go-to train guy in a lot of cases. This article would often have really catchy clickbaity headlines like you cross the country by train? I went across the country by train for just $213. I'll get to the explanations of it. So this is by a man named Derek Lowe. Derek Lowe has his own blog that's travel blogs that I've read a couple other articles about. He has been on several other trains before, and those other trains that he's been on, he's written about. Like he also went on the Trans-Siberian Railway, which is on my bucket list. And in this train here is the California Zephyr, which is one of the ones that he's been on. So, across the USA by train for just $213. Let me get my phone to respond to a text. I'm going to tell my wife that I'm filming this. All right, let's keep going. Turns out you don't need a car to see America. Map from San Francisco to New York with a dot in Chicago. 4.0 million shares, and I think about 2 million of those were to me. All right. Traveling coast to coast across the United States by train is one of the world's greatest travel experiences. Amazingly, it's also one of the world's greatest travel bargains. The 3,400-mile trip can cost as little as $186. I'll explain why I don't think it will only be that much later on. The American railroads are reminiscent of a bygone era. These were the trains that tamed the Wild West, fueled the gold rush, and served as the backbone of the Industrial Revolution. At its peak, it was the most luxurious mode of transportation that money could buy. Yeah, when your options were take the train or walk, I could see why it would be a better option. Alas, the golden age of American railroads came to an end. Automobiles arrived and the airplane industry took off. Soon, many railroad companies had to cut losses and cease their passenger services. And then Amtrak came to be, which I have another video about. Today, the USA still has an excellent rail network for visitors that'll take you to almost all the towns and cities a visitor would want to see. Arguably, the most scenic and historic of all the train routes in America is the cross-country journey from San Francisco to New York. As you climb through the snow-capped Sierra Nevadas and further east through the heart of the Rockies, you may find it hard to disagree. Well, let's see how it went. Ooh, here's a triple header engine. Amtrak Usually only has 2 on them. I guess they're moving a third for repositioning purposes. Here's another one. And here's just 2 engines. By the way, when 2 engines are faced like that instead of back to back like they normally are, it's referred to as elephant style. In December 2011, I traveled from San Francisco to New York by train. This is my trip in pictures. The 3,400-mile coast-to-coast train ride takes 4 days if you do it without stopovers. Of course, you should make stopovers, but you'll need to buy separate tickets for each leg. Oh, he has a passport from Singapore. I didn't notice that. He came to the US to do this train trip? Okay. The train doesn't technically depart from San Francisco, but 20 minutes away in Emeryville. Emeryville is across the San Francisco Bay from San Francisco, and Pixar has their headquarters there. So a few people know about it, but you can't take a train to San Francisco like an Amtrak train from one coast. You have to take the longer trains to Emeryville. Also in Emeryville, you could transfer to a different train and go up or down the Pacific coast. But you'd have to go this way if you wanted to get to San Francisco. I arrived at the station and found my train, the famous California Zephyr, a direct train traveling 2,438 miles from San Francisco to Chicago over 3 days. The Amtrak trains have names. Some people don't know that they do. The California Zephyr is one of them, and it's one of the longer ones. At 9:10 a.m., I boarded the train to begin my journey across America. There he is doing the double backpack thing. When I would travel home from college, sometimes I did the same arrangement. I'd have my main backpacking pack on and then put my other backpack on the front. And when I'd walk through train stations or bus stations like that, I would get a lot of funny looks. Day 1, San Francisco to Salt Lake City, 17 hours. The train begins its journey running alongside the tranquil waters of the San Francisco Bay Area for some fabulous coastal views. Like so. At some parts, the train was literally a foot from the water. In the distance, I saw something that wasn't too inviting. Oh no, clouds. The famous fog of San Francisco was rolling in, and it rolled in fast. There it goes. Before long, the splendid bay view became this. This is mostly what you're going to see when you're on Amtrak trains, views like that. It appeared that we may have made a wrong turn into the enchanted forest and life around us started dying. Yeah, it can give that appearance sometimes. The window eventually became a smokescreen of white. I fell asleep soon after. I woke up some hours later and noticed that people were drawn to the scenery outside. No doubt it was something worth looking at. This actually is pretty. And so is a lot of Amtrak scenery if you get on the right trains. I moved to the Sightseer Lounge car, fitted with enormous windows that wrapped upward into the ceiling. The Sightseer Lounge cars are where you go to just hang out and look outside. They have these chairs that face outward, so you can just sit and watch things go by. And they usually have a snack cafe on the bottom floor of them where you can get something to eat. And sometimes if you don't want to pay for the dining car, the cafe car is your only option. At Sacramento, an expert from the California State Railroad Museum came on board to give live commentary of the scenery. They do sometimes have people come on the train and talk about what's going on around the train. I know in some places it's park rangers that come on the train and do that. When I was riding the Cardinal in rural West Virginia, they did that. And they pointed out some stuff around the train, like the New River Gorge, which is kind of hard to miss if you're down deep in the New River Gorge. As we passed Donner Lake, he retold the story of the Donner Party who were stranded here in the winter of 1846. Some of the party of 87 resorted to cannibalism. Only 48 survived. Oh no. Strangely enough, this made me hungry. Derek, what's wrong with you? So I went down into the cafe and bought myself some lunch. It appears that he has an evil looking dried out hot dog with sogginess in the bun, a root beer, and a bottle of water. And that may be the best thing you can get on an Amtrak train in the cafe car, or the snack car, as some people call it. One time I was on the Cardinal and the train was super late, and the only thing I could get for dinner was a roast beef sandwich and a Pepsi. The roast beef sandwich looked far, far less appetizing than this hot dog here does. Anyhow, as the train climbed into the Sierra Nevada, the temperature dropped quickly and we were suddenly surrounded by snow. Another few hours later, the landscape turned into a vast, barren desert. If you fall asleep and wake up, it's almost like you were transported to a different planet. Yeah, it can look like that sometimes in that part of the country. With a gleaming casino in the distance, it became clear we have crossed into Nevada. The train calls it Reno, the biggest little city in the world. Looks like the sun's going down. The train station for Reno is kind of sunken down into the street. So it's not like you can just hop off the train, go pull a slot machine a few times and run back to the train. If the street's up here, the train's down here and it's like in this big ditch of concrete. Somewhere in the middle of the desert, I lost cell phone data signal. Yeah, that happens. And the Amtrak trains claim to have Wi-Fi. They only actually have Wi-Fi about half the time, and it's never really any good. If you're wondering what the rustling noise is, that is my pet cat rustling around in her box that we made for her. It's a cardboard box filled with paper. So I resorted to taking selfies to pass the time. 2011 was right around when the word selfie came to be. In the evening, we were treated to a view so sublime, you began to wonder if people who fly across the country and never take the train are quite possibly insane. No, they're not insane, and most of them fly because it's a couple hours rather than 4 days. But I can definitely see why people would want to or not want to. As the sun set, it was time for dinner. There's some luck of the draw involved with dining on an Amtrak train. Yeah, like whether or not they'll actually have anything for you to eat. Excuse me. There are usually insufficient seats for dinner, so passengers are seated with random strangers at the tables. Yeah, if you have so before the meal times, your conductor will come around and take meal reservations from what I heard. And they'll assign people based on those. Like you might sign up for dinner at 4:30 or 5:30 or 6:30 or something like that. And if you're in a group of less than 4, then they'll put other people with your group. So you get to meet new people. You never know who your dinner companion would be. It's awkward for the first time, but many frequent train passengers actually find it to be one of the joys of train travel, meeting people from all walks of life. And I could see enjoying that, meeting some new people on a train. But if they ever did that at a random restaurant, I would not go there. As for me, I enjoyed a half rack of baby back ribs with a man who didn't like talking very much. Okay, these look okay. I should say I've never actually eaten on an Amtrak dining car. I've eaten in a cafe car, which is where you go to buy snacks and evil looking hot dogs and sandwiches, while the dining car is where you would go to get actual food, like this rack of baby back ribs. An hour later, at a small Nevada town, There was a scene of confusion as the train pulled into the station with police cars standing by. The police boarded the train and arrested my dinner companion on suspicion of possessing firearms. Okay, so that's that. You don't have to go through security to get on a train like you do on an airplane, but it's still prohibited to bring weapons on a train. You can bring firearms under some circumstances if you put them in your checked bags, like on an airplane, and they put them in the baggage car and secure them. But it doesn't sound like this guy did. During the night, the train crossed from Nevada into Utah. Entering a new time zone, the clocks are adjusted an hour forward. At 3 a.m. in the morning, the train pulls into my first stop, Salt Lake City. I don't know which building this is. It might be the train station, but that's pretty big for Salt Lake City's train station, which just has this train each way once a day. I spent a day exploring its Mormon heritage before moving on. This is the Salt Lake Temple, the biggest temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as the Mormons, who, in case you didn't heard, have somewhat of a presence in Utah and Salt Lake City. Day 2, Salt Lake City to Denver, 15 hours. The journey between Utah and Colorado is regarded to be the most spectacular train ride in all of the United States. We spent the morning chugging through the American Wild West, chugging like old steam trains that go chugga, chugga, chugga. Nah, diesel trains go more like. The train follows the southern rim of the astonishing Book Cliffs. Why would someone name this area that? We crossed into Colorado, marked by the sign Utah-Colorado, painted on the wall of Ruby Canyon straddling the two states. That's pretty cool. Utah, Colorado. The California Zephyr climbs into the Rocky Mountains and snakes for hours through beautiful Colorado canyons. Now, snakes referring to a verb that's about trains, that's definitely appropriate. They can look like big snakes from the air. I believe Harry Potter and Ron used it to describe the Hogwarts Express. For much of its journey through Colorado, the train follows the path of the Colorado River. It's a lot of the same. If the trains are going through a really mountainous place, they're probably going to go through somewhere that's close to a river, because down near the river, there's more flat land. It's easier to build train tracks. So that's where the people back in 18 something would have built the train tracks, and where they still are now. You'll get a chance to see a particularly odd breed of Colorado wildlife indigenous to the area, kayakers. It's long been a tradition for rafters to salute the passing train, giving this area the highly appropriate nickname of Moon River. Very well. There were also dozens of Amish folks traveling on the train. They tend to avoid technology and not use cars or airplanes. Occasionally, they resort to taking the train. I live in an area with a lot of Amish people, and if you take the train from Lancaster to Philadelphia or somewhere around here, you probably will see Amish people on the train because they are allowed to take the train. They can ride in cars, but they can't drive cars. And while they can go on airplanes in some circumstances, they usually prefer not to. So the train is one way that they'd like to travel. And if you've ever seen Witness, which was filmed not far from me, you know this to be true. Soon it was my favorite time of the day, lunch. Please tell me that you got something better for lunch today, Derek. Once again, it was a game of social roulette. I was assigned to sit with two elder ladies who may or may not have heads. I see that he's drinking some sort of pale ale here, which Amtrak does sell beer and wine for super inflated prices. And sometimes they'll have some local craft beer on the train. I ordered a bacon cheeseburger, which looked surprisingly good for something that was cooked on a moving train. That does look pretty good, actually. I know Amtrak's famous for their steak, but their burgers are also supposedly pretty good. The train passed the Byers Canyon rifle range, and I found myself hoping that the guns were not pointed in the wrong direction. Yeah, I hope so too. If there's any older rifle instructors there, they would not be very happy if someone turned around with their rifle. The train eventually emerged from the Rockies onto the Great Plains as we approached Denver. Train is super high up on a ridge like that. The train pulls into Denver, the Mile High City. Despite its location on a vast flat land, Denver still stands at 5,280 feet above sea level. And you can see that this train station is another really elaborate and fancy looking one, despite it only having this train go one way and another train going the other way once a day, and that's it. Denver makes a lovely stop for exploring the city and its surrounds. I spent 2 days there before moving on. Okay, I need to explain something. Amtrak does not let you just jump on and off the train whenever you want to. My parents have told me stories about traveling through Europe where they could get a Eurail pass and just ride the train wherever. And if they saw a nice looking town, they would go, "Yeah, let's jump off here. We'll just get on the next train." No, you have to book your tickets usually ahead of time for Amtrak. And if you get off the train, you're gonna forfeit the rest of your ticket and you'll have to buy another one for the next train, which may not be until the next day, or it may not even be for a few days. Some trains only run 3 times a week. Derek will say later on that he did this with a USA Rail Pass, which is Amtrak's attempt to keep up with the Eurail Pass, but I'll explain how that works later on. Point is, you're probably not going to be jumping on and off the train as much as Derek is here. But if he's from Singapore and coming to visit the US, I could see where he would want to spend time exploring different places. Day 3, Denver to Chicago, 19 hours. He did this in 17 hours, and now he's going to do that in just a little bit longer. Okay. Today's journey would bring me through 4 states: Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois. I slept through most of the journey as the train traveled through the night. Sleeping on the train is surprisingly comfortable. The seats are spacious with plenty of legroom and they recline a good 40 degrees. They're more comfortable than economy class seats on planes, perhaps something more like business class on a crappy domestic airline. I have been on trains where they have seats more like this. They can recline a bit. They have a footrest pop out like a recliner, and you can lay back there. And I'm pretty tall, and I didn't have a problem fitting into the seats. And I did fall asleep for a good bit of when I was doing it, so I could see sleeping here. Amtrak trains in the Northeast have really small seats, basically like airplane seats. And if I had to sleep there for a few days, I don't think I could. But here, it's a different story. Sleeper cabins are also available, albeit at a significantly higher cost. Let's just say you are not going to do this trip for $213 and get one of these rooms. They are pretty expensive. The California Zephyr completes its journey at Chicago's Union Station, a historic landmark in its own right. Now, Chicago has a pretty big train station. They also have a whole lot of trains that go all around it. So this big train station is justified. A noteworthy attraction for movie fans is the stairway from the famous stroller scene in The Untouchables. I've never seen that movie. I spent a day exploring the city. The view from John Hancock Tower is particularly impressive at sunset. Day 4, Chicago to New York, 20 hours. Yep. The California Zephyr gets you as far as Chicago. To complete the journey to New York, you need to transfer to the Lakeshore Limited or the Cardinal, which I have done the Cardinal from DC to Prince, West Virginia, but never the Lakeshore Limited. Oh, isn't that cute? And a couple sharing a bottle of wine. The many hours on the train makes for a fantastic time to write. I don't know. Every time I get on a train and try to write stuff, I just get too distracted by outside. Amtrak actually offers a writer's residency program where they provide free train rides just for you to sit and write. I applied to that once, didn't get in because maybe they heard me say that I can't really focus on writing. Excuse me, on the train. The train travels through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania before entering New York State. As soon as you see the Hudson River, you'll feel a sense of exhilaration that airline passengers will never know. We've almost crossed America by train. Bear in mind, it takes a while to drive across New York State, whether you're in a car or on a train. So this takes a lot longer than he makes it sound like. The train finally pulls into New York Penn Station, ending my journey on the east coast of the United States. Penn Station is okay, Empire State Building's in Midtown, Madison Square Garden's around here somewhere, and Penn Station's underneath that. Epilogue. Here's that map from earlier. Well, that concludes it. An epic 3,397-mile journey across America. It took me through 11 states and 4 time zones to cross the entire North American continent from coast to coast. Ooh, Friday evening blues. In just 4 days, I've seen both the Pacific Ocean and Atlantic Ocean without taking a flight. Some people have told me that I've already seen more of the country than most Americans, and that's true. Most Americans I know have not left their own hometown. Traveling by train gives you a glimpse into the soul of America. The experience rewards you with far more stories and experiences and sights than you could ever witness alone in a car, eyes fixed on the road, or on a 5-hour flight across the country. If you want to see tourist America, rent a Cadillac, get on Route 66, and stop off at a few cutesy diners and hotels. That's funny. If you want to see the real America and all its spectacular, crazy, kooky glory, get on the train. How much did it cost me? I paid $429 for a 15-day rail pass. This is the USA Rail Pass that I mentioned earlier. Amtrak offers this on their website. I'm not sure how much the prices are now, but basically you get it and you have a certain amount of time to use up the segments on it. It is not for a certain amount of unlimited rail travel. You buy it and they might give you 8 segments that you can break up. Like, for example, Emeryville to Chicago would be one segment, Chicago to New York would be one segment, or in this case, Emeryville to Salt Lake City would be one segment, then Salt Lake City to Denver would be another, Denver to Chicago would be another, and Chicago to New York would be the last one. So that would be 4 segments. Oh, and he explains this. The rail pass includes 8 train rides, which I use to explore other cities after my cross-country journey. If you're thinking of stopping at a few cities, a rail pass can be a great value. Note that a 3-day journey counts as one ride, but so does a 30-minute one. If you work out the math, each ride is $54 on the rail pass. In comparison, most long-distance journeys cost upwards of $80. Now, if you Amtrak does not want you to use this as a commuter pass, like from here to Philadelphia or something. They do have commuter passes for stuff like that you can get. For some people, buying the direct California Zephyr and Lakeshore Limited tickets should suffice in getting you from San Francisco to New York. Tickets for the entire journey are available from just $186. I think I'll go to Amtrak.com and see how much it is now. Oh, look, save $100 on the USA Rail Pass. 10 rides for just $399 through March 29th. Yeah, I don't really have time to go on a train trip like this. One way from Emeryville, California to Nuevo York. Depart date. Let's book a couple months out. Coach from 251. 197. Okay, let's see what the 197 is. California Zephyr to Chicago. And then 6-hour connection in Chicago, which may be more of a no connection in Chicago based on how late these trains can be. Okay, so you can get this journey for $197 if you want to try it, but you need to still eat on the train, and getting stuff at the dining car is going to cost about as much as going to a restaurant on your side of the country. It would be kind of like if you went to an average restaurant where the food's just meh, okay, and they gave you the bill, and then you'd be like, I got ripped off. That's kind of what it feels like to eat on the train. And I told some people this, and they were like, "Oh, but you can just bring some peanut butter and live off of peanut butter sandwiches the whole time." Yeah, you could do that, but I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound very fun. And that's the end of it. But anyway, that's taking the train. There is food involved, and one thing people don't talk about is Amtrak trains are late a lot of the time, especially the super long ones like this one. That means that you could get in a couple hours later than you thought you would, or sometimes even up to a day later than you thought you would. I know somebody who took the City of New Orleans, the train that they have the famous song about, and was delayed super, super long and just barely made their connection to from a different train from Chicago and had a really bad time on it. But anyway, this is that article. And if you want to go read more of Derek Lowe's stuff, it's at dereklowe.co. So you guys have a good night.